the tiny chip that's powering the AI revolution, and Samsung just landed a $1 billion deal. What if I told you that one of the most important components in the entire AI boom isn't a GPU, isn't a processor, and most people have never even heard of it? It's called a silicon capacitor. And right now, a company just locked in a deal worth 1.557 trillion Korean won. That's roughly 1.1 billion US dollars to supply these things to one of the biggest tech companies on the planet. Welcome back to USA Grid Mechanics, where we break down the hardware, the supply chains, and the industrial moves that are quietly reshaping the tech world. Today, we're going deep on a story that connects South Korean manufacturing, American big tech, and the future of AI infrastructure. On May 20th, 2025, Samsung Electro-Mechanics, the components division of the Samsung Group, separate from Samsung Electronics, announced it had signed a 2-year supply contract running from January 2027 through December 2028. But industry sources strongly point toward a major North American big tech firm. We're talking the usual suspects. Think AI accelerator development, think hyperscale data centers, think the company spending hundreds of billions on AI infrastructure right now. Here's what makes this deal significant on paper alone. That contract value, 1.557 trillion won, represents 13.8% of Samsung Electro-Mechanics' entire annual revenue. That's a company-defining contract. Okay, let's slow down and actually explain what a silicon capacitor is, because this is where it gets genuinely fascinating from an engineering perspective. You probably know what a capacitor does in basic electronics. It stores and releases electrical charge, smooths out voltage fluctuations, filters noise, standard stuff. You'll find them on basically every circuit board ever made. The traditional version used in consumer electronics is called an MLCC, a multi-layer ceramic capacitor. Samsung Electro-Mechanics is actually one of the world's top MLCC manufacturers. But MLCCs have limits. As AI chips get more powerful, think Nvidia H100s, B200s, custom ASICs, they're pulling massive, fluctuating amounts of power very rapidly. When a GPU is doing matrix multiplication for a neural network, the power demand spikes and drops in nanoseconds. If your power delivery isn't rock solid, you get voltage noise, and voltage noise causes errors, instability, and degraded performance. This is where silicon capacitors come in. Silicon capacitors are fabricated using semiconductor wafer processes, the same family of techniques used to make actual chips. They're ultra-compact, ultra-precise, and critically, they have dramatically lower ESR and ESL, that's equivalent series resistance and equivalent series inductance, than ceramic alternatives. In plain English, they respond faster, lose less energy, and can be placed physically closer to the chip die itself, sometimes embedded directly inside the semiconductor package. The closer your power conditioning is to the chip, the less noise you introduce, the more stable your power delivery. For AI server packages, which are these massive, stacked, multi-die structures running at enormous power densities, silicon capacitors aren't a luxury. They're becoming a necessity. So why is Samsung Electro-Mechanics winning these deals? Because this market has historically been extremely locked up. The silicon capacitor space has been dominated by a handful of players, Japan's Murata being the big name, and interestingly, TSMC, yes, the Taiwanese foundry giant, also competes here, leveraging their wafer fabrication expertise. Getting into this market isn't just about capital. It requires customer qualification, a lengthy, expensive process where you prove your components meet exact specs under real-world conditions. It requires ultra-fine process control. And it requires the kind of manufacturing discipline that only comes from years of high-precision component work. Samsung Electro-Mechanics has that foundation. Their MLCC business is world-class. Their FCBGA, flip chip ball grid array, substrate business put them deep inside advanced semiconductor packaging. They've been learning, accumulating process knowledge, and clearly, it's paying off. They previously supplied silicon capacitors for AI accelerators to Marvell, a US fabless chip company making custom AI silicon for hyperscalers. That relationship was the proof of concept. This new deal, whatever the customer is the scale-up. Let's zoom out for a second, because this story is really part of a much larger shift. The AI infrastructure build-out happening right now is unlike anything the tech industry has seen. The hyperscalers, your Microsofts, Googles, Amazons, and Metas, are spending hundreds of billions annually on data center construction and AI hardware. Every one of those AI servers needs GPUs. Every GPU needs advanced packaging. And advanced packaging increasingly depends on components like silicon capacitors. What's interesting here is the supply chain geography. The chips get designed in America. The wafers get fabbed in Taiwan or Korea. The advanced packaging happens in Taiwan, Korea, and increasingly the US. And the precision passive components, the capacitors, the substrates, the connectors, come from a tight cluster of East Asian manufacturers. This deal is a signal that Korean component makers are moving up the value chain, from commodity parts into specialized, high-margin AI-critical components. And American tech giants are willing to sign long-term, high-value contracts to secure that supply. There's also a strategic angle here. Post-COVID supply chain disruptions made every major tech company acutely aware of component concentration risk. Long-term supply agreements like this one, 2 years, locked in years in advance, are part of how hyperscalers are trying to secure their AI hardware roadmaps. Samsung Electromechanics isn't stopping at AI servers. Their stated roadmap moves silicon capacitors into high-performance computing more broadly. That means autonomous driving systems, where you need extremely reliable power delivery in harsh environments, and even high-end mobile devices, where miniaturization demands are pushing the limits of what ceramic capacitors can do. If silicon capacitors become standard in the next generation of flagship phones and automotive compute platforms, we're talking about a market expansion of an entirely different scale. The CEO of Samsung Electromechanics called this deal an important milestone in strengthening the company's position as a total solutions provider for key components in the AI era. That's corporate speak, sure, but the contract number backs it up. The company's building the physical layer of AI, not the models, not the software, but the actual silicon and components, are going to be critical infrastructure players for the next decade. So, a $1.1 billion silicon capacitor deal. Quiet, technical, and enormous. This is exactly the kind of story that doesn't make the mainstream headlines, but absolutely matters if you want to understand how AI is actually built. If you found this valuable, hit that subscribe button. We cover the hardware, the supply chains, and the engineering decisions behind the biggest technology shifts happening right now. Drop a comment below. What do you think the mystery customer is? Until next time.